Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Rome in America podcast. Before we get into it, make sure to hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. I would really appreciate it. And, so let's get into it. So, kind of a slow news day. Actually, like the past couple of weeks, the news has been really slow. I mean, there's certain events going on in the Middle East and here at home on the domestic front and all that stuff. But overall, the news cycle has really slowed down. There really isn't too much interesting to talk about recently. But I guess there is one story that, again, it's not too prominent, but it is being reported in the news that I would like to talk about, and that is Cuba, which is a topic I don't think I've ever touched on. So, Cuba, what's going on in the news is that it appears slowly but steadily that America is preparing for a regime change operation in Cuba. And a lot of this has to do with, some people have their arguments about why that is, but overall it appears that the Trump administration is gearing up for a military operation at some point in Cuba. Most people believe that this operation will be similar to what we saw back in January in Venezuela. So, just a brief recap, if you probably don't know. So, in Venezuela, on the night of, actually early morning, technically, of January 3rd, basically American military forces just off the coast of Venezuela in the Caribbean basically launched a massive, very quick precision strike onto Caracas, the capital, in which the entire power was shut down. A bunch of helicopters flew over the sky and started launching missiles and bullets and all that stuff down onto the ground in Caracas. And they basically flew in really quick, went to the presidential palace, grabbed the president, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife, got them on the helicopter, left the city, and quickly went back to their aircraft that was in the Caribbean. And this whole operation took basically about 3 hours to complete. It was a very quick operation. Not only was it quick, but also there was barely any casualties. There was, I think, a few Venezuelan civilians were killed and a few Cuban guardsmen that were in Caracas were killed, coincidentally, but no American soldiers were killed, and only 2 were really seriously injured, but it appears that by now both of them have recovered. And so that's really what's been going on that's really what happened in Venezuela. It was super quick, and basically Maduro was extradited and brought to New York, where he's going to be tried and all that stuff. And his vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, basically took control of the country, and now she appears to be more cooperative with the Trump administration than Maduro ever was. And so this wasn't a regime change, what happened in Venezuela, but it was a military operation that certainly affected our relationship with them. And, you could argue that overall, based off of what happened, that it was a net positive, in general. But basically now, the Trump administration is now gearing up for something similar in Cuba. Now, who knows what's going to happen, and who knows if it'll be a quick in and out operation, the same way that Venezuela was. But that does appear to be what's happening next. And the current president, I think his name is Miguel Diaz Rodriguez? No. I forgot his last name. But anyways, it's a hyphenated last name. But anyways, he's the president. And then he's not president anymore, but Raul Castro is still alive. I think I saw that he was charged somewhere. I'd have to look more into it, but although I really don't see a point in that, because the dude's 94 years old. 94, he's going to croak any day now. So there's really no point I really don't see a point in putting him in jail when, he could croak before even being put behind bars. But basically, basically it appears that there's something going on. And now there apparently now a narrative is emerging that the Cuban government is now getting access via either the Chinese or the Russians, getting access to certain military technology like drones and or missiles and stuff like that, and that they're going to use them to attack Key West, Florida, which, for those who don't know, Key West is just 90 miles north of the Cuban coast. Like, it's basically on land, it would basically be an hour and a half drive away. And so it's, Key West is the closest, basically the closest it's basically the closest American soil to the Cuban mainland, only just 90 miles away. And so they're claiming that they're going to attack Key West, which, by the way, Key West is mostly a tourist destination. There's really no point to attacking Key West. But even still, there really doesn't appear to be any evidence that that's the case. And, I'd have to read up on it a little bit more, look into it more. But I really haven't seen people sounding the alarm as if this is a true threat. And so really what this just shows is that the administration is now using this as a casus belli for why we need to attack Cuba. Almost like the same way in which we used narco-terrorism as the casus belli to attack Venezuela. Excuse me. But anyways, so I really don't know what's going to happen in Cuba. I don't know if it's going to be a quick, one-day operation where we apprehend one or two officials in the Cuban government, in the leadership, and then we basically just try them and charge them, and that's the end of that, I guess. But it appears right now that things are, reaching a boiling point slowly. And, there appears to be, somewhat of a naval blockade around Cuba right now. I mean, I think I heard that apparently within the last 5 months, only one oil tanker from either China or Russia, from China basically, only one oil tanker has been allowed into Cuba in the last 5 months. And, they're constantly having power outages. They're using up a lot of their energy, whatever energy infrastructure they have left to try and keep power going. But there's a lot of power outage that is going on. And, as a result, and apparently over the last few weeks, some journalists have been going to Cuba to see what it's like on the ground there. Like Nick Shirley went there, I think. Nick Shirley, the independent YouTuber journalist, went there. Ryan Grimm from Drop Site News went there. And basically what they're seeing is that, and of course, Cuba is basically a time capsule. I mean, because ever since the Cuban Revolution in the late 1950s, I think the revolution was complete by 1959, basically they've had massive economic embargoes placed on them by the U.S. And because of that, a lot of their economic infrastructure is almost the same as it was either in the 1950s or the 1960s. Barely any. It really has not changed too much. I mean, you look at, for example, the cars there, the houses there, just the general infrastructure in general, and it's all decades old. I mean, there really hasn't been too much change. And so, with this naval blockade, you wonder if they're trying to, squeeze the Cuban government, if the U.S. is trying to squeeze the Cuban government into submission. And, either way, it's going to reach a boiling point of some kind, and it appears that it's growing increasingly likely over this past year. It just keeps going more and more. And so, basically, I don't know what's going to happen this summer, or if anything's going to happen this summer, but the stakes are being set. I mean, we saw this with Venezuela. I mean, we basically had them under massive economic sanctions for several years. And then starting last August, Trump massively increased their naval presence, the U.S.'s naval and marine presence in the Caribbean Sea and all that stuff. And, over the course of a few months, we kept hitting boats off the coast of the country that were allegedly transporting drugs, although no solid concrete evidence has indicated that they were. But still, that's what the claim was made. And for a few months this went on. September, October, November, December, and then at the beginning of January, on just the third day of the year, that's when we went in and made our move. And that took place over really over a period of 5 months, because this began in early August when the bounty on Nicolas Maduro was doubled from 25 million to 50 million. And then that was, I think it was August 7th of last year, if I remember correct. And then January 3rd is when Operation Absolute Resolve was basically enacted. And that was, that was over a period of 5 months. Now, it seems that pressure's been ratcheted up on Iran or on Cuba since the Iran war began at the end of February, beginning of March. So that would have been over about 2.5 months ago. And so that basically means that we could see a military operation in Cuba at some point this summer. I mean, currently it's the middle of May right now. We could see something happen before September. I don't know what. I don't know when specifically, but, we could definitely see the U.S. military make a move at some point. And it wouldn't be too hard, by the way, because, Cuba is just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. So it's not like we'd have to travel very far, which means that this could happen. See that? Because that's the thing. To get ready for the Iran war, we obviously had to send aircraft, tankers and refuelers and aircraft carriers and several destroyers. We had to line them up all perfectly around the Middle East, in the Eastern Mediterranean, just in the Arabian Sea, just off the Persian Gulf, basically around the entire Middle East. And we saw that happening in January and February. We saw the buildup. With Cuba, though, they're so close to the homeland that you would barely notice a buildup. And that a buildup would barely even be necessary because that's how close they are. But it appears that, based on the news we're seeing as of late, that it appears that something's going to happen. Something's going to happen eventually. And it likely will happen sometime this summer. And so, who knows what's going to happen, but basically that's something to keep in mind, is that we could do a military operation at some point in the near future, and it appears Cuba will be the next target. And, I'm not going to comment too much on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it appears that is what is going to happen in the future. And so we'll see when it happens, if it happens, but, we just got to wait and see. So, yeah, thanks for sticking around. Thanks for, sticking around and listening to this episode. Next episode will come out whenever, hopefully tomorrow, maybe the day after, soon. And, make sure, once again, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and thank you for hanging out, and I will see you all in the next episode.